Today on Hearts of Heroes. Heroes heed the call when one of California's worst wildfires threatened their mountain community.
I could see the fire spreading 3 directions at once.
Plus, a twister tears through a small Alabama town.
It was probably about 5 minutes, and I said, we gotta go.
And leaves one family trapped 8 feet underground.
We could see then that we weren't getting out.
Thankfully, heroes were on the move. The people who live in Tornado Alley know that preparation, a safe space, and a plan are the keys to surviving the twister.
But as one family found out, even the best laid plans can't protect you completely from Mother Nature's wrath.
If you follow the winding roads of the Sierra Nevada mountains, just above California's Central Valley, you'll find yourself in a small oasis known as Big Creek. Founded humbly as a work camp for the Edison hydroelectric power plant more than 100 years ago, the town hasn't grown much since. Today, the population still sits just under 200.
My grandfather worked for the Southern California Edison Company. So as a child, I would come up here on weekends to visit my grandparents. So when I came up here 10 years ago, it was like coming home.
And you can be sure that with a population that small, there is no such thing as a stranger in Big Creek.
Takes you back 50 years. Everybody knows everybody's name. Everybody treats everyone like family. Everyone sincerely cares about everyone in this community.
Manfred Schultz found a home here more than 50 years ago after immigrating from Germany. Today, he's considered a main pillar in the community.
I heard about this area here, Edison Company being up in the mountains, so I came up one weekend in May '67. And I just fell in love with the area.
The town of Big Creek has little more than a post office and general store. So the Big Creek Elementary School is an important gathering place in town for residents of all ages.
Really, the school is the hub of the community. It's not just a school, it's the community center. We have a 3-lane bowling alley, we have a swimming pool, rock climbing wall, we have an indoor archery range with compound bows.
There's a big shindig in the school gym. There's chili cook-off, there's arts and crafts, the kids put on a performance. It is the most quaint Norman Rockwell-ish type of scenario I've ever seen in my life.
But in September of 2020, their quaint way of life was threatened by the Creek Fire. It's the 4th largest wildfire in California's history.
It started on Friday evening, just a small plume of smoke, and the community, we all gathered on the helipad out there. We just kind of watched. We didn't think much of it. We went home, went to bed.
Volunteer firefighter Lisa Sanley was 7 hours away visiting family when she got word of the fire.
We contacted our fire chief to see if they needed us to come back. And as things were escalating, within a couple of hours, we turned around and drove all the way back.
By early the next morning, the fire was right outside Big Creek.
About 4 in the morning, the sheriff's department came through on the loudspeaker informing us that we needed to evacuate the community.
With the main road closed off, trying to get people out while simultaneously trying to get fire equipment in was a daunting feat.
We had to leave the back way out of Big Creek. We call it the Beaver Slide. It's a 1-lane road on the side of a cliff. So you see lowboys bringing bulldozers in, fire engines on this 1-lane road going up this cliff, and I was just petrified.
We went through the back road, which is precarious even when it's off-season, and there were so many emergency response personnel coming through, a large amount of smoke, and then we got down here to help our department. It was just chaos.
Lisa geared up and joined her fellow firefighters, but they were all at a severe disadvantage.
We had about 8 or 9 engines and less than 60 personnel fighting this fire that was growing larger and larger and larger by the minute. We did get air support the following day. There were 3 helicopters that were dropping retardant, and there were a host of different companies that assisted us.
The magnitude of the fire, coupled with the rugged landscape, made this a monster of a task.
Where the fire started down canyon was a very remote area. I could see the fire spreading. It was spreading 3 directions at once. The terrain is such that there are no roads to get to these areas to be able to fight that fire.
And the weather was making their job even more challenging.
So you had the situation with the high winds. So you have fire spreading from the treetops as fast as the wind can blow. There was a very, very high level of concern, knowing this could go from bad to worse within just hours, and it did.
Coming up, the creek fire becomes a terrifying inferno.
It became literally 200 and 300 feet flames.
And later,
I could feel the ground shaking beneath my feet.
a tornado traps people in their cellar.
You pull the wrong piece and it's going to collapse totally.
But first, a safety tip.
Wildfire smoke and ash can irritate your eyes, nose, throat, and lungs, or even make it hard to breathe.
You can use an N95 mask or respirator over your nose and mouth to help filter out smoke and ash particles before you breathe them in.
You can learn more about protecting yourself from wildfire smoke by contacting your local or state health department.
In September of 2020, a massive wildfire swept through the Sierra Nevada mountains in central California. Firefighter Lisa Sanley returned from a family vacation only to find her beloved town up in flames.
By the time I got here, structure protection was our primary focus with my company. And then CAL FIRE was also trying to protect and contain the fire so it didn't spread throughout the forest. So there was multiple strategies and many different responsibilities.
While most of the town had evacuated their homes, longtime resident Manfred Schultz stayed behind, trying to save his house, but it was no use.
And then the fire crew came, and the one guy said, "You got to get out of here. We're going to burn up if we stay."
Manfred narrowly escaped as the fire raged out of control.
It became literally 200 and 300 feet flames. I got fire burned on my exposed areas, and I wasn't even terribly close to the fire, but the heat was so significant that I'm sure everyone got fire burned. There were wildlife that were running by me that were injured. Smoking. I hit what I could with my hose as they ran past. I wasn't prepared for that. This was a hard thing. I'm telling you, it was so hard, especially the animals. Sorry.
Despite the physical and emotional toll, firefighters bravely battled the flames. One of the main structures they focused on, the Big Creek School.
There was a very large crew here around the school and the surrounding homes. There was a large focus on keeping this community intact. The fire crew did a great job, in my view, of minimizing as much damage as they could.
After a week of fighting the inferno, people were finally able to return home, but their town had taken a real beating.
Houses just completely gone, power lines across the road, water running down from fire hydrants. I was not prepared for that sheer amount of devastation when I arrived here.
It was almost a surreal feeling coming up here that, I've worked on a lot of catastrophes, but never one this close to home. So it really affected me on a personal level.
2/3 of the homes in Big Creek were destroyed. Sadly, Toby Waits' home was one of them.
My own kids, they looked at Big Creek and this house that we lived in, a place that they can come back to later as adults. And that's tough, knowing that they'll never live here again. And that's really hard to wrap their head around.
Even though Toby lost his own home, he knew he had a responsibility to both his community and the students of his school.
The greatest priority for me as the superintendent was to get our children back into the classroom as soon as we could.
The structure of the school was saved, but it still had a lot of damage. Our sponsor, Belfour, was brought in to lead the restoration process.
I was happy to see all of the buildings were still standing. And, that there wasn't a whole lot of actual fire damage to the structures themselves. So it was mostly smoke damage.
They probably had 60, 80 people here for about 3 straight weeks, going through the classroom, cleaning the carpets, wiping the walls down, going through the air ducts. And it was really important for me to get the kids back into normal routines on a daily basis.
While the team at Belfour were working on the school, they learned that Manfred Schultz's house had suffered significant damage, and they wanted to give back to this man who had done so much for Big Creek.
From planting trees to building retaining walls to the water system that was put in. Manfred has given his time, his talents, and his resources to the community of Big Creek and to Big Creek School.
He had no insurance. So I had spoke with my senior estimator on the project here, and we agreed that we wanted to help this gentleman and replace the siding on his home and also give him a new roof.
Not only did they take care of all the repair costs, but they had one more surprise for Manfred.
So on behalf of Belfour, I would like to present this check to you to reimburse you for the materials that you purchased.
Oh my gosh.
You've been such a pillar in this community and given back to this community the entire time you've lived here, and it's Belfour's small way of thanking you for that and our way of giving back. So please accept this check.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Despite the horrific loss caused by the fire, the people of Big Creek are determined to rebuild and keep their very special community intact.
We will rise up through this. This fire is not going to define who we are or what we are about.
We are still the same folks, still the same community, and we pulled together. And yes, we've been hit hard. Did we come together and are we dealing with it? Yes, we are.
Coming up, a twister ravages a small town and buries a family in their own home.
It was the most violent 30 seconds I've ever encountered.
The people who live in Tornado Alley know that preparation, a safe space, and a plan are the keys to surviving a twister.
But as one family found out, even the best laid plans can't protect you completely from Mother Nature's wrath.
Look at a map right in the middle of the state of Alabama, and you'll see Chilton County. It's known for its peaches, prairies, and majestic red oak trees. Chilton County is also home to quaint farm towns like Jemison, population 2,500.
Jemison is a very small town. People here are very close. Everybody knows everybody. So it's a very tight-knit community.
It's like that little quiet town you hear about. Everybody usually that lives here grew up here, went to school here.
Greg Toney is a rare exception to that rule. See, he moved to Jemison about a year ago. He's from Louisiana, so Greg is used to hurricanes, but tornadoes, not as often.
These tornadoes that come across central Alabama in the spring and in late fall, early winter, it's a different class of storm altogether. They seem to run longer on the ground, cover a lot more area.
It was March 25th, 2021. A tornado watch was issued and included Chilton County. People that lived there, first responders, all began preparing for a potential tornado event.
We had forecasts telling us that there was a possibility that there would be bad weather, and later it became very violent.
We checked the trucks, made sure they had fuel in them, made sure our chainsaws worked. We may have to go cut trees out of the road or whatsoever.
The watch became a warning. The severe weather had arrived.
It was probably about 5 minutes, and I said, we gotta go. We got to go.
Greg, along with his wife and mother-in-law, rushed down to their underground storm shelter in their garage.
I saw the storm was right across the road from us, and all of a sudden it just got real quiet, real still, and all of a sudden just rattling noise, and then the world started shaking, and I could feel the ground shaking beneath my feet.
The three braced for impact as the tornado pummeled the earth above their heads.
The event itself lasted approximately 30 seconds, and it was the most violent 30 seconds I've ever encountered. But it was terrifying, terrifying.
But as quickly as it came, the tornado was gone.
We sat there and looked at each other, assessed each other,
The three were unharmed, but now they were facing something just about as terrifying.
I came up the steps and tried to push up on the shelter door, and it wouldn't budge. So I got my axe and hit on it and realized there's something heavy on this thing.
What Greg didn't know was that a huge red oak tree had crashed through the garage and was blocking the cellar doors.
We could see then that we weren't getting out.
Coming up, trapped underground on a remote farm. Would first responders get to them in time?
So it took 4 different routes because trees were down blocking every one of them.
But first, a safety tip.
In the event of an evacuation, there are a few easy ways to stay informed.
Local authorities will do their best to alert residents about potential dangers and evacuations. You can also stay up to date by closely monitoring your local news, radio, and law enforcement social media accounts to stay informed.
Remember, evacuation orders are issued for a reason. When in doubt, don't wait, evacuate.
On the evening of March 25, 2021, a tornado ripped through Chilton County, Alabama. Greg Toney and his family had taken cover because they knew it was coming. They were in their underground storm cellar. But the ferocity of the twister ripped an oak tree out of the ground and sent it crashing into their garage. That then blocked the doors of the storm shelter.
And we could see then that we weren't getting out.
Thankfully, Greg's wife had her phone, and she called 911.
Cell phone towers can easily be knocked out from natural disasters. Luckily, though, if your cell phone says it has no service, it may still work for emergency calls, as they're able to connect to other service towers to help keep you safe.
The 911 dispatcher immediately told first responders. But getting out to that isolated farm would not be easy.
It took 4 different routes before we could get to them because trees were down blocking every one of them.
By the time first responders arrived, they knew they had a Herculean task ahead of them.
At this point, firefighters had to pull out chainsaws to try to cut through that huge oak tree.
They're cutting on the tree, trying to get them. Well, because of the way it was situated, there could only be one person at a time cutting on this tree. You pull the wrong piece and it's gonna collapse totally.
Realizing that the rescue could take hours, if not days, Officer Oliver had to find a different way to get that trapped family out.
So I went through the house into the garage that way, and I saw a light flashing off the wall, and eventually I was able to trace the source of the light to under some rubble, but this looked like, to me, a much easier, safer way to get them.
Officer Oliver jumped into action, enlisting the help of some of the other people on the scene.
I went out there and got a few of them and asked them to form a line and started passing debris to them.
Piece by piece, they removed the wreckage blocking the entrance to the cellar until a portion of the door was exposed.
One of the firefighters was able to use a sawzall to cut the door open, and once we were able to cut a door open, we were able to reach inside and grab the victims and pull them from the storm shelter and escort them out.
When they all stepped out of the cellar, Greg and his family could see firsthand the full extent of what they had just survived.
As I looked around after we came out of the hole, it shocked me just how much damage was done in such a short period of time. It was so quick, so violent, but there was so much torn up.
Even though Greg and his family had gone through this horrific event, they were thankful for all the heroes who showed up for them that day.
I was just overwhelmed by how many people were actually here. The fire and sheriff's department neighbors, people I've never seen, never met before. That was very, very heartwarming to see those people there.
My message to the family is the sheriff's office will always be here to help you whenever you call us, no matter how big or how small.
This is what's left of the garage. Just a slab, a wall, and a couple little pieces of roof.
Seeing the immense power of the tornado has given Greg a new respect for Mother Nature.
Being right here, knowing that I was 8 foot below it, with this monster traveling across us, it puts you in a different perspective. But I'm just grateful that storm shelter was there. We were able to get into it. We were fine. and that's all that mattered.
No matter what type of disaster you might face, you can do things right now to prepare. Be alert and have a plan.
Know where you and your family will be safe, and then have faith that our first responders will be there to back you up. Thanks for watching.